Flight AF 723 from Paris to Ouagadougou was full that morning. Passengers settled into their seats, businessmen in sharp suits, tourists with restless eyes, and one man dressed simply, reading quietly by the window. Nobody knew that this ordinary-looking passenger carried a secret big enough to shake the entire cabin. Sophie Lemaire, a flight attendant with 15 years of experience, had seen every kind of passenger. But that day, a problem landed in her lap. A powerful French businessman had missed his earlier flight, and the airline insisted he must be seated in first class, even though there were no seats left. The cabin chief's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Sophie, find someone to move down to business class. Offer compensation, vouchers, anything." She scanned the rows. Everyone in first class looked too important, too unwilling. Then her eyes stopped at the man in the beige shirt and dark trousers. He wasn't wearing a suit, had no gold watch, no arrogance. To Sophie, he looked like the least important person in the room. With a polite smile hiding her nerves, she leaned toward him. "Excuse me, sir. We need to seat another passenger here. Could you kindly move to business class? The airline will compensate you generously." The man looked up slowly from his book, an essay on African economics. His eyes were calm, steady, and piercing. In a soft, confident voice, he asked, "Is there a problem with me being here?" For a second, Sophie hesitated. She didn't expect such a composed response. "No, sir," she replied quickly. "But this is a matter of priority." Heads turned. Other passengers were watching. The man closed his book, slipped it into a worn but elegant leather bag, and stood up without complaint. "I will change my seat," he said simply. Sophie exhaled in relief. Problem solved. She glanced at the manifest. His name, Mr. Traore, in business class. He settled into a window seat with quiet dignity. "I don't need compensation," he told Sophie, "but I would appreciate some tea after takeoff." Meanwhile, in first class, the French businessman took his new seat, already, grumbling about delays. The plane lifted into the sky, and Sophie felt the tension fade. She didn't know yet that the real storm was only beginning. Hours later, as Sophie served meals in business class, her younger colleague Amina pulled her aside, whispering urgently, "Sophie, do you know who you asked to move seats?" Confused, Sophie replied, "A Mr. Traoré? Why?" Amina's eyes widened. "That's not just Mr. Traoré. That's Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso." Sophie's blood turned cold. Her hands shook, the tray nearly slipping from her grip. "No, that's impossible. A president would travel with guards, an entourage, something." Amina shook her head. "Not him. He's known for traveling quietly without show for secret diplomatic missions. The captain just received confirmation from air control. There's an official delegation waiting for him in Ouagadougou." Sophie's heart pounded. She had just demoted a head of state, her country's guest, because he didn't look important. From a distance, she stole glances at him. He sat peacefully, reading, occasionally sipping tea, offering a gentle smile to crew members. Not once had he revealed who he was. Not once had he protested. Shame clawed at Sophie. She realized the ugly truth. She had judged him by appearance. The simple clothes, the quiet demeanor, they had fooled her into thinking he mattered less. "I need to apologize," she whispered. "Not now," Amina cautioned. "The captain says his visit must stay discreet. No scenes." So Sophie carried on with her duties, but each time she passed him, her face flushed. Later, turbulence shook the cabin. Sophie steadied herself near his seat. Gathering courage, she leaned closer. "Sir, may I bring you anything?" He looked up, eyes kind. "No, thank you. Everything is perfect." Sophie swallowed. "I want to apologize for earlier. It was wrong of me." Closing his book, He studied her face for sincerity. Then he spoke. You were doing your duty. Don't burden yourself. No, she insisted. I judged you unfairly. That was my mistake. He nodded gently. Do you know why I agreed to move without protest? Because seats, classes, titles, these are illusions. What matters is how we treat others and how true we remain to our values. His words struck her like lightning. Sophie's eyes burned with tears. He continued. In my country, I remind people that power is not privilege. It is duty. True leadership does not need a throne or a first-class seat. It is carried in how you live, every single day. When the turbulence eased, he gestured to the seat beside him. Come, sit for a moment. Sophie hesitated, then sat. Who I am doesn't matter, he said softly. We are all human beings deserving of respect. You could have forced me to stay, but what would it have proved? My worth is not tied to where I sit. He turned to the window. Outside, a blazing sunset painted the sky orange and violet. He smiled. Besides, the view is better here. Sophie followed his gaze, and in that moment, she understood. As the plane neared Ouagadougou, whispers spread through the cabin. Passengers had caught on. The quiet man in business class was not ordinary. He was their president. Sophie's shame deepened, but it also gave her courage. She approached the French businessman in first class. Sir, she said firmly, there is someone in business class who deserves your seat more than anyone else on this plane. Would you kindly exchange seats with him for the remainder of the flight? The man frowned. And who exactly deserves my seat? Sophie straightened. The president of Burkina Faso. The businessman's jaw dropped. The president? Of course! Immediately! He scrambled to gather his things. The irony wasn't lost on Sophie. The same man who had displaced Ibrahim Traoré was now desperate to give up his spot. Sophie walked back to him, her voice respectful but low. Mr. President, may I invite you back to first class? Not for comfort, but for the respect you deserve. For a moment, he studied her face. Then he smiled softly. Very well, but only because I see it matters to you. As he walked through the aisle, passengers looked up, eyes wide with recognition. Even those who didn't know his name could feel it. His presence carried quiet authority. Before landing, Sophie approached him once more. Her voice trembled. Mr. President, this meeting has changed me. I will never judge by appearance again. Thank you for the lesson. He smiled warmly. We are all teachers and all students. The key is to keep our hearts open to the lessons life places before us. The plane descended. Through the windows, the lights of Ouagadougou glimmered, like stars fallen to earth. My country is not rich in gold or luxury, he said, gazing out, but we are rich in spirit and dignity. I hope one day you will visit to see that richness. Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. I would be honored. When the plane landed, there were no grand ceremonies, no red carpets, just a quiet delegation waiting respectfully. He stepped off the plane with the same calm dignity he had carried throughout. Later that night, in her hotel room, Sophie wrote in her journal, Today I embarrassed a president, and in return, he taught me humility. True greatness hides in simplicity. From this day forward, I will look past titles and clothes and search for the true worth in every person. Months later, an envelope arrived for Sophie, a personal invitation to a cultural exchange program in Burkina Faso. On the corner, handwritten in simple ink, was a note. Real meetings change us. Welcome to Burkina Faso. What began as a mistake became a lesson she would carry forever. True power never needs to be announced. It reveals itself in humility, patience, and dignity.